So, welcome to you that have joined us here today to this digital seminar, which has the title, How to Keep Your Calm, Art as Alternative. And my name is John Huntington. I'm working as an international coordinator here at the Constitute in Gothenburg. I'm representing the international group here in the organization, which works with guest studios and international projects. And just before I start, I just gonna say that this conversation is gonna be recorded. It's most likely going to be put up on our web page within the coming week or two. And also, when the people that are not speaking I see that most people already has done that, has turned off their camera. So we'll see if we can save some bandwidth if people have slow connections. But in the end, when they have a discussion in the end, you can turn on the camera again if you want to pose a question and say hi. So I will just quickly introduce the event. We have invited 3 other artist-driven organizations from other parts of Europe. We have Dion Brown from Armstrong House in Limerick, Ireland. We have Nicolette Balázs from Muto in Budapest, Hungary. We have Martin Briselj Baraga from Museum of Transitory Art from Ljubljana, Slovenia, with us here today. And when I invited you guys to this talk, I had this kind of broad strokes when I had a kind of a description of our current media climate, how the public discussions nowadays are going with. It's a quite fast tempo. People are trying to get heard. It's quite loud voices, and many of these loud voices that are also the alternative voices. And to me, it feels like they are coming more and more from the right-wing positions in Europe, at least. And traditionally, art has functioned as a kind of an alternative presenting utopian ideas, humanitarian projects, etc. So I want to ask how are this looking for different artist-driven initiatives today? And also how in this climate where the digital mediated public debate are quite characterized by positioning and polarization. So from this kind of point of view, I wanted to try to discuss these questions with other alternatives and other organizations. So I will also quite quickly introduce as everyone else will introduce their organization. I will a bit quickly introduce Constitute to the people that doesn't know who we are. I think most of the people here are probably know who we are. It looks like most of them must have Swedish names in the participant list here. But Constitute is an artist-run organization based in Gothenburg, in central Gothenburg. It's been around since 1987. It's situated in an old epidemic hospital, which is quite bizarre maybe, or in these times, from one of the epidemics of the 100 years ago, cholera, etc. And here we have 130 artists approximately that are active. And it's very various disciplines. It's musicians, artists, writers, actors, dancers, filmmakers. Yeah, and we run an artist in residence program and have gallery spaces and children education programs, etc. I can also just super quickly show you an image if you haven't seen how it's. So now you should see my screen. Here's how it looks, where we are situated. Here's how it looks when there's people. It's not this summer, unfortunately, and this is a couple of years ago when people could meet. And so I will not go in so deeply into how we address these questions that were posed in the event. I will rather like our three invited guests to talk about their organization and maybe address one of the questions that were the questions that we had before the event was how an organization can be slow rather than fast, friendly rather than competitive, performing actions rather than having opinions, or producing less rather than more information. And these kind of questions, these statements can of course be disputed if it's good or not to be slow rather than fast. And I think that is something that we could discuss today, later. So first we will have three presentations, approximately 15 minutes each. And after that, we'll have more of a discussion. And after each presentation, it's a possibility for maybe one questions if somebody that are participating would like to have a question, but just quite quickly because we're saving it to the discussion in the end. So first out, I would like to ask Dion Brown from Armstrong House. Welcome, nice that you could participate today.
Thank you very much. I suppose I'm going to start sharing my screen now, so you can see what I have in front of me, hopefully. And so it should be okay. Is that sharing okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Thank you. So my name is Niamh Brown and I work with Armstrong House in Limerick in Ireland. And I just first of all want to say thank you to John and to constitute for the invitation to kind of participate today. I suppose when the invitation came in, I was quite struck by the questions that were being posed, and I think there's something that we think about quite a lot in our work. So I know. This is Armstrong House where I work. And actually, before I get into kind of the PowerPoint presentation, I do want to share maybe this video because it might give a better sense to the life of Armstrong House as opposed to kind of static images just to start off with. But also there's kind of something I maybe highlight about this video maybe a little later on as well, just when I get to talking. So John, if you want to let me know if the sound works, if you heard that little bit.
This an introduction, let's let our minds function. I like to keep myself occupied, overthinking about something. I've never been the type to push myself to my limit, but I have this ability to draw pictures with lyrics. And it's money that makes the world go. Don't get paid half enough to give a fuck, but I do though. A fool's road, always have my heart in the right place. Doesn't get you many accolades these days. The life of a sinner. Lines, I look in the mirror and see what you find. Don't hold yourself back, speak with your mind. The sinner, peek through the blinds. The life of a sinner, peek through the blinds. I look in the mirror and see what you find. Don't hold yourself back, speak with your mind. The life of a sinner, peek through the blinds. What world premiere? What world premiere?
So, just going back to the slideshow now. So that was, I suppose, I just wanted to share.
My name is Mary Conroy.
Sorry, something is playing in the background there. Just give me 1 second there now, and I'll just get rid of that other page. So yeah, I just wanted to, I suppose, share Armstrong House in a bit more of a lively form, because for like many other organisations, we've been close to the public for over 13 months now. And ironically, that video we shared first kind of shared it in February of 2020. And it was supposed to launch quite a significant year for us in terms of our programme. So I just thought it was kind of interesting to, maybe it was a bad omen or something that we kind of put out in the world, that it kind of didn't go our way. But just to kind of, as a point of reflection, I suppose it's an interesting thing that we kind of think about anecdotally now. But just to, I suppose, introduce Armstrong House more formally, we're a meeting place for the arts in Limerick City. And this is our building. We're on the central spine of the city. And for those of you who are not familiar with Limerick, it's Limerick City, I suppose, is Ireland's third largest city. Population is approximately 105,000. So it's quite a small city. 44% of the population are kind of new communities, or kind of a multicultural kind of community. It's a university city with 3 third level institutions. And that kind of reflects in sort of the age demographic of the city, where 50% are living in the city centre are under the age of 35. There's also something that makes it interesting to work in Limerick and be based in Limerick, is that there's quite a high rate of unemployment within the city. So your population makeup and your audience makeup, your participant makeup is quite diverse, ranging from various backgrounds in both education, but also in terms of a socioeconomic profile as well. But with that as well, there's exceptionally strong community kind of focus and ethos to the city. Another thing about Limerick is it is based on the River Shannon, which is Ireland's largest and longest river. So here is an image from one of our projects, from a research phase to a project that I'll kind of go into a little bit more in more detail later on, called the Museum of Mythological Water Beasts. So it's quite significant to the city for various reasons, both kind of in a former kind of a historical point of view from industry, but also in terms of like economics, and how the city was developed, I suppose, over time, and how it's still quite a significant kind of port city as well. Armstrong House, there are, I suppose, 3 pillars to our programme: artistic ambition, public and community engagement, and professional development. It's quite a diverse programme. Predominantly we're a visual art space. We do a lot of exhibitions, develop projects with visual artists, but we also have quite like strong performance projects and performance events, workshops of all kind of different art forms. All of those projects are informed, and all of the way that we work, I suppose, is informed by a core question, which is how can we support artists better? We're also, I suppose, part of a number of local and European networks. The AIM network, which some of you might be aware of, which is Artist Initiative Meetings, and that was started a number of years ago by organizations that were, I suppose, repeat attendees and participants at Supermarket in Stockholm. We're also a member of Trans-Europe Pals, which is the largest network in Europe of cultural spaces, and cultural spaces that are specifically based in, I suppose, repurposed buildings. We're also a member of the River Cities Platform Foundation, and locally in Limerick, we're the Limerick Public Participation Network, which is a network of feeding that allows community groups and voluntary organizations to feed into kind of local authority kind of policies and decisions. And we're also a member of the Irish Network Against Racism, which is quite, I think, important given the year that we've all had. Well, in general anyway, of course, but more significant now. Our program, within our program, we have a membership scheme. It's free, it's flexible, and it's open. So anyone can join, any artist can join. All you have to do is sign up. There's no charge to become a member. And within that, there are various call outs for membership opportunities from year to year. They could be participation at Supermarket, for example. It could be for a specific project or an exhibition or another professional development opportunity as well. Quite important to our program is the R&R program, or quite central. It's a central part of our program rather, and it stands for Research and Residency. And that's both inbound and outbound. So it could be one of our team members going on a research trip, for example, partaking in an event like this or another networking event. And also kind of inbound research where artists will come to Limerick, kind of spend time in the city and get to know it before potentially, developing a project. Underneath that as well, we have our Artist in Residence scheme. At the moment, we have 3 long-term artists in residence. This doesn't operate in the traditional residency scheme because we don't have a studio facility at the moment. Well, we don't have a studio facility. I think in the future we would like to have studio facilities. But what it does is act as a support mechanism for artists that are based locally. So we would offer support, whether it's anything from curatorial visits, mentorship, help with applications, for example. Artists will be actively partake in the program and the projects. So these are 3 images by each of the artists in residence. This kind of first image, the drawing, is of Niamh Porter, who will be exhibiting with us in Juxtapose Art Fair in Aarhus later this year. Below her image is an image from Ciara Barker, who's one of our other artists who we'll be hoping to bring to Supermarket later this year as well. And then the other image is Mary Conroy, who has a number of projects happening this year, including one with Folkestone Fringe in Folkestone in the UK. And she was part of our kind of Creative Europe project, A Memory of Water, as well, for the last number of years. And I suppose I'm just going to, that's sort of like the program in a nutshell, in a very, very small nutshell, in a snapshot. And I think today's invitation was quite interesting to us, or to me in particular, because when John posed these questions initially, they're things that we think about quite often. This idea of being slow rather than fast, performing actions rather than having opinions, being friendly instead of competitive, producing less information rather than more. And I think for me, they're all quite linked, and they'll kind of come up at different, I suppose, I'm going to talk more generally, I suppose, about these, because I do hope today will be a little bit more conversational rather than me talking at you. And also just to say, I don't have the answers for these questions. These are things that we are actively thinking about and talking about. A key point in our program history was a project that we did with Mark Dion in 2015. He's an American artist who came to Limerick to do a research residency, initially in the summer of 2015, and then came back later on that year for a production residency and for his exhibition. And it was the first time we'd done a research residency with an artist prior to an exhibition. And it marked quite a significant change in our program. Before that, we'd been operating at an almost commercial gallery model, where we would, you know, an exhibition would open on a Thursday evening, but it would run for 4 to 5 weeks, and then it would close on a Saturday, and then next Thursday there'll be another project in there. And there's quite a fast pace of, I suppose, this fast-paced way of working. It was incredibly beneficial for me when I was kind of learning, and I suppose, you know, gaining skills in terms of curatorial practice and in terms of production. But it was, I should say as well, at the time, it was all based on voluntary labor. So this was done for a number of years, and it was very exciting. It was, everyone was working, you know, their feet were on the ground, we were running around. It was quite an exciting time to be part of the project. But I think it came to a point where everyone was getting very tired. We didn't have the time to really process what we were doing, to really think about the program kind of more generally, or situating it within kind of a local context, in kind of a really kind of in a deeper way, I suppose. And as well, I mean, this format, it's to do with a number of factors because of, you know, funding opportunities. You know, you plan a year ahead. There is that competitive nature to funding as well, where you want to do more and you're like, okay, we'll do more for less. And which is quite, you know, what we recognize now is quite like unhealthy, as well. But it was just it was part of the ethos in the beginning, you know, this artist-led initiative where we were just kind of kept going all the time. And I should mention as well that in 2014, Limerick was the inaugural National City of Culture in Ireland. So it came around a time where there was a lot of activity in quite a short space of time. And it was this, you know, this excitement around the city, this kind of energy and this hunger to produce more and more projects and more exhibitions for probably, you know, for kind of similar amounts of money to how we've been working before. And it was, I suppose there was, when things started to slow down, kind of post 2014, we still had quite a jam-packed, you know, program for 2015. But it was this experience with working with Mark where we actually decided, we're like, no, actually, let's put a stop to this pace and let's consciously try to slow down. And it took a long time for us to really get that process right. It started off really slowly about having less exhibition projects, allowing for more, I suppose, other public events, whether it was talks or performances, to be able to come into the space, and opening up the space to kind of other festivals as well and other activities around the city, which has been really, really important for us. And I suppose the first time that was really successful in terms of how this kind of a slower programming was a project called the Museum of Mythological Water Beasts, which we'd, I suppose, started thinking about in 2016. And it kind of kicked off in 2017 with an open research process where we invited the public to help teach us about the River Shannon, for example, and to really inform the areas of research that we were looking at. So we did a series of events, both kind of along the River Shannon, and it took us. It was a really kind of valuable, you know, I suppose, experience, because we met a lot of people that we wouldn't have met before, who weren't our kind of natural audience within the city. But it informed the research for the second phase of the project, which is the commissioning phase, which is a photo of that kind of installation here, where we invited 8 artists, and there was you know, new commissions, and also kind of an opportunity for our members to feed in as well. And that project was realised then in 2018. So it was quite a long process, you know. It was a project, I suppose, that was developed over 2 years, and actually now it's in its third phase in another kind of instance with a residency project that goes the whole way up the River Shannon, which has been quite important. So I suppose that change of pace in our programme has been hugely kind of beneficial to, I suppose, a curatorial development of the projects, in terms of audience participation or community participation. And as well, I should say, is what I'm with the second phase, the exhibition or commissioning phase of this project, each artwork was installed at a different time. So it would, you know, each artwork would nearly add another layer to the exhibition. And it was on for a much longer kind of exhibition run than previous projects. So what it allowed is it allowed the public to understand actually the curatorial thinking, the curatorial process in terms of adding in artworks one by one, which was it was the first time that we've done that. And it's something that we kind of hope to be able to continue to do as well in the future. So I just kind of, I mean, that's one project or an example of how we think about pace, or thinking about working slow as opposed to working fast. Just in terms of slowing down the thinking, allowing time for artists to really develop a project that is relevant to the city, relevant to the context. I should also say as well that there was a research weekend where all artists came together for a weekend and explored the city, had research visits together, which was hugely important. And I just want to like go back to John's questions here as well. So I suppose performing actions rather than having opinions, I'm not sure where I stand on that, because I think sometimes an action can have quite a significant effect on an opinion, and vice versa. Being friendly instead of competitive. I mean, in a city the size of Limerick, there is, you know, a small number of, I suppose, arts organizations that are working continuously, and we're always almost, for outsiders or for in terms of development plans, we're nearly always pitched as always competing with each other. We're actually, we should be working together, and we all kind of complement each other. We have a different focus, we have a different kind of area of expertise, we have different audiences. Producing less information rather than more, for me, is, it's, I don't know where I stand on that one either. I suppose for me, it's, again, it relates to pace a bit, you know. It's not necessarily about information really, but this idea of, you know, producing more and producing less, and that could be an environmental issue, or it could be to do with, again, a slow kind of production phase, or a slowing down of production, which is something that I kind of think about quite often. So again, like, I'm very generally speaking about these because I hope we can kind of have a bit more of a concrete discussion kind of later on. And then these are things that I think about when I think about pace. I mentioned burnout earlier as well, but I think this is probably something that I think everyone has felt at different points. So recognizing burnout, I think, is hugely important when thinking about pace, or kind of how you work. You know, questioning how fast is too fast and how slow is too slow. This idea of being busy all the time, and this is something I've talked about quite recently with other colleagues in other organizations, this need for arts workers, artists, to always be busy, and to be almost performing the idea of being continuously producing something or multiple things at once. And if you're not, you know, what does that mean? Is it that you are less successful, or is it that you are less involved or something? In terms of, I suppose, thinking about the pandemic, about, you know, this change of rhythm since the pandemic. I mentioned earlier, kind of in, you know, in previous conversations with John as well, about this idea of valuing your time and professional time versus your personal time, especially when people are, you know, working from home, and carving out those chunks of time for yourself. About thinking about post-pandemic, you know, whatever a post-pandemic looks like. For me, I'm very, like, Ireland is very much in the pandemic, but what will our working pace be like? You know, will we just go back to what it was before? We're thinking about rest an awful lot at the moment as well, and this idea of, you know, radical rest as being part of your practice, being part of, you know, a way of you to sort of take time for yourself. You know, it's a practice of care, but it's also just in terms of a research and being able to kind of function kind of healthily, but also at your kind of most creative self, I suppose. And then I suppose, yeah, guilt, which I think is this idea of, like, if you slow down, do you feel guilty because of it? Or, you know, this, you know, slowing down and pace. For me, yeah, it is linked to guilt, I guess, and this idea that we always have to, again, going back to being busy, do we always have to be busy? And if you do rest, do you feel guilty about that? And then again, I mentioned briefly, again, practice of care, and very much seeing curatorial practice as, you know, part of that is being about a practice of care, and that's both for the artists that we work with, the participants that we work with, and for our team. around the time of like 2015, when we kind of made this decision, we very consciously put the team at the center of activities rather than an exhibition program, rather than a public program. And everything that we did from then on kind of centered around the team. So that's been quite important to us. And I by no means have the answers, I suppose, to these questions or these ideas that I've been speaking about, but I suppose it's just to kind of talk about these kind of openly, and I suppose to hear from everyone else as well, how they are kind of, I suppose, reflecting on these kind of ideas. But yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now, but if anyone has any questions, please do let me know.
Thanks a lot, Naeem. I think it's super interesting regarding pace, and specifically in connection to being busy, and also guilt about not being busy. I just see, is anyone in the of our audience, our participants, that has just one question? Otherwise, I have several, but I can take one of them and we'll save the other ones for later. One thing I was just thinking about here in the end is this about being busy and keeping up appearance, being active all the time. Do you think that artists and artist-run organizations and organizations dealing with art, were they better or worse prepared for this in regards to that is quite an maybe kind of an activity that are not, it has differences to other occupations, for example? Do you think that how are artists prepared for this? Are they?
I think it's been quite interesting. That's a good question, I suppose, because I think it's been interesting to see in the last year how artist-run initiatives or artists themselves have adapted. And I think in terms of a change of working environment, an artist can kind of work, you know, a lot of artists that I know have home studios, for example. So working from home is not an issue. But it's been interesting to see, I suppose, how visual artists in particular have kind of adapted. Whereas a lot of the sports that initially came in Ireland around the pandemic were more geared towards artists working in performance ideas or theatre, music, for example, where a live stream was, you know, a live stream of a performance, for example, was something that was seen a lot, and we're still seeing quite a lot of it. But that didn't necessarily translate to visual artists. So there was kind of, I suppose, a slowing down of, you know, it definitely slowed. Maybe visual artists weren't maybe as visible initially in Ireland because of that. But I mean, that's certainly changed. I think they have adapted. But I think all artists adapt quite easily, or not easily, but they're, you know, artists adapt by, I think, by nature. I think by the sector, you know, adapts so often that, you know, an artist is used to having to be flexible and used to having to work around obstacles or kind of a changing rhythm or a changing circumstance. And I think that's the same for kind of an artist-run initiative as well. And I think something with Armstrong House is that for years, our kind of tenancy in our building was very precarious. You know, thankfully that has been, you know, sorted now, and we have kind of a long-term tenancy in our building. But that uncertainty and that precarity, as much as it definitely, you know, it held us back in some ways because it made it very difficult to access larger amounts of funding or more continuous funding. But it allowed us to be very flexible in the way that we worked. We could, you know, determine our own working hours. We could determine what artists we were working with, you know, in a much more kind of fluid way. As opposed to kind of another institution or a larger institution, a municipal space, for example, where they are quite, you know, kind of restricted an awful lot by how they operate or kind of the mechanisms that they have to answer to. So for us, you know, it's been an interesting one. It's been you know, very difficult, of course. And we certainly haven't been in a rush to kind of transfer our entire program to online. I think where projects easily kind of transfer to online, we've done that, but it hasn't been, you know, I know a lot of visual art, I suppose exhibition spaces really have kind of moved exhibitions online, whereas we really didn't want to do that. We still wanted to honor our exhibitions, and a lot of the time, you know, at the moment, like our projects that we're working on have a lot of commissions in them, so we didn't want to change the kind of commissioning aspect to that work. We wanted to realize the work, so we've been able to be quite flexible in terms of how we've adapted, and thankfully as well our funders have been kind of receptive to that as well, and they've been very understanding and patient with us, and we're just understanding more so as well, which we're, you know, obviously very grateful for. So I think, I'm not sure if I've completely answered your question, or, you know, gone off again on a tangent, but yeah, I think artists and artist-run initiatives, I think because they're flexible, because maybe they work between those lines of precarity and sustainability and you know, all of those things, it allows for a certain amount of adaptability, whereas I know other, like friends of mine in other sectors have really struggled with working from home, whereas I would have been a bit more used to that, or, you know, I can adapt. Absolutely, it's frustrated me, of course, but and I cannot wait to get into the space and install an exhibition, you know. You know, I'm quite hungry for it, I think, really, but you know, yeah, I think artist-run initiatives, you know, as I've said, you know, are more flexible than others. So.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's I can really see. I can also see how you reason. I feel kind of similar. I think we'll move on, taking some more questions later when we can discuss. So I would like to introduce Nicolette Balázs from Muto, from Budapest, Hungary, to present you. So very welcome. Nice that you would like to join us here today.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see it? Okay, so greetings to all. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Nicolette Balázs, an artist and also a member of Muto. Muto was founded in 2016, and Muto is an artist-run gallery and also an art collective. Sorry. Yeah. So the basic goal was to create a gallery space and also a thinking space after the graduation for ourselves and also for other emerging and young artists. Here you can see the members. We are mostly artists. We have only one curator, Zsófia Kókai, and everybody has their own project next to this artist-run gallery. So I think it's very interesting to experience both sides, also working in your studio and creating your own stuff, promoting your art, and also providing space for other artists. But it's also hard because you have to split your time. So there are advantages and disadvantages. Goals. Our mission is to find new ways of creation. Working in your studio and waiting for some commercial galleries to pick you up is only one option. I mean, that's great, but we believe that the underground and artist-run scene has so many possibilities. And we try to expand the boundaries of art, building a community through a critical and curatorial approach and democratic structure based on DIY culture. Here is our current space in Budapest, Hungary. This is the second one, and we already organized over 37 exhibitions and more than 22 music performances, participated at 2 international art fairs for non-profit institutions in Stockholm and also in Helsinki, collaborated with so many artists, musicians and artist-run galleries from Eastern Europe to the USA. And here you can see a few examples from our exhibitions. This is White Heaven, a solo show from Veronika Romhány in 2019. And for us, very important to show ourselves and also to promote each other, because we are also a community. We had an open call, international open call in 2019, and this exhibition is one of them. You can see the finissage from Gergő Offner. This exhibition is co-organized by Lateral Art Space and Mythe, and it's called Play. And you can see on the left Miroslav Tóth performing. Dynamic Systems was also an open call selection. This was a cooperation with Moholy Nagy University, and here is also an opening performance by Levente Lukács and Zsófia Temesvári. And here I can see here already the mask, yeah. Acidic Taste. We took part in Supermarket Art Fair in Stockholm, and there we met with Durden André Gallery from Los Angeles, and we decided to organize an exhibition exchange. And here you can see 3 of us at the exhibition space in Los Angeles with Durden André Gallery. This is another amazing space in Cluj, in Lateral Art Space. And the exhibition is co-organized by Lateral Art Space and Mythe in 2019. This exhibition from Liliag and Berce Barta, they are also members and founders of Mythe. It was in Bratislava with Hot Dog Project Space. And our topic, how to keep calm. Our strategy is, instead of being competitive, trying to rely on each other. And I think it's not always easy, because we were educated in a different way, in a very competitive background. And I feel like sometimes for us, Mythe, it's like a little land where everything is working differently, but in a much better and effective way. We need to spare time for discussions and understanding each other, and after that trying to coming out with common solutions. And it's not always easy and need more time, but I think it's worth it. And it's a totally different kind of communication, how you deal sometimes in the real life. Being busy versus being focused, it's a hard task, because at the beginning you have to accept a lot of opportunities. Now we are in the business for 4 years. We are still young, but we try to focus on the most important project, try to split the works into small groups. So I think we are dealing better with this topic now, but I don't feel that we produce less information. We have more work to do as the time spending, so we are busy. Yeah, I can say that. I think it's good. I like to be busy, but yeah, I'm also that kind of person who feel remorse if I am not occupied all the time. So yeah, it's a good question and good task to discuss. We have two current projects, Alterum and Sandbox. And of course, with the COVID, we have to change a lot with this project and modify them. Alterum is founded by International Visegrad Fund, and this is an artist-run network in the Central and Eastern European region. This is a collaboration between Prague, Košice, Budapest, and Belgrade, and we will organize an exhibition in every gallery in the same time with online exhibition tour in June, and hopefully we can arrange the Sandbox Performance Festival in September. So this is the two important projects to deal with. And follow up, you can reach us through the website, our Facebook page and Instagram page. And if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Nicolette, for this presentation. It's super interesting to get to know your group of people. I will begin with saying the same question. Is it anyone from the audience that has a question for Nicolette? Otherwise, I have several, and I'll begin with one. I really recognize this, how you said that we are trained to be competitive rather than collaborative. And then maybe when people actually graduate, they need to be collaborate because it's hard to be active otherwise if you're not like super successful. So how, and you said that you're finding strategies then to collaborate better. So my questions would be, are you, these strategies that you have to be able to be friendly and collaborative rather than competitive, or do you feel that you are they similar to other initiatives? Do you think that your strategies are, do you have to, I don't know, come up with them yourselves, or do you learned them from elsewhere?
We are not only colleagues, we are also friends. So it's a little bit difficult to distinguish between other initiatives because I don't know how they work, but we have other responsibilities because if we have problems as colleagues, potentially we also have problems as friends. Yeah. So for us, it's very important to deal with the problems and trying to be better also individually and also as a group. Mm. So yeah, it's a good training to work in in an artist-run space. Yeah.
And I totally agree with you there. I've been active in a few of them myself. So let's move on. Thanks a lot, and then I'll welcome Martin Brisell Baraga from Museum of Transitory Art.
Hello.
Welcome. Nice that you are with us today.
Hello, Sweden. Hello, Ireland. Hello, Hungary, and hopefully somewhere else. Thanks, John, for this invite. So, shall I start?
Yes.
The presentation. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let me share the screen. Works? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
it works.
So basically, yes, I'm Martin Britzel-Barrera from Mota Museum of Transitory Art. It's an NGO, artist curators run organization. We are based in Ljubljana, Slovenia. People sometimes consider it to be Eastern Europe, but basically geographically we are Center Europe. So the name Mota Museum of Transitory Art deals with the very idea of museum, how to deal with art, how to present art, etc. So it's a take on museum, but also why we use the name transitory is because, let's say, contemporary art in many, let's say in many countries doesn't feel the right word for what it is, or let's say contemporary art sometimes really presents trends from 60s, 70s, or etc. And we are working in the field of media art, sound art, a lot of public space, architecture, and a mix of those disciplines and other related problematics. And so as each museum, it's a small organization, right? I mean, it's like 4 people that established it, and usually when we have the festival, it's like 12 to 15 people, but it's a smaller group of people working together, as I mentioned, from artists, curators, critics, architects. As each museum, we also have this, let's say, slots or main program programs. One of the most known program is Sonica Festival. Then we have Arcade Gallery, a sound gallery in the center of Ljubljana. Artist Talk, which is something like what we are doing now, artisttalk.eu. It's a video portal of lectures, roundtables, discussions. And then there are some other projects that are now more on hold than being active. For example, TRIBE is an acronym for Transitory Research Initiative in Balkan and East, which was kind of residency network in these off cities, not the centers of art, but more like Belgrade, Prague, Cyprus, Istanbul, and other areas. And yes, I will continue showing some of the projects. So Mota actually, by the very definition, is not a museum in a physical space. We do have space, but we are actually devoted to work with public space in very broad sense. So it's like public space in the city. We work a lot in the region, meaning whole Slovenia or European, and working internationally, and also a lot of online projects. So public space for us, it's kind of, we try to understand it broadly, but still we do have a space. We used to have, and we call it info point of a museum. We used to have a Mota point, which is most of the pictures you see here, where we presented a lot of exhibitions and performances, lectures, workshops. In the frame of Sonica Festival, we yearly present a lot of, let's say, recent artists, recent works, local and international. Here we always have exhibition of media artists. We do have like concerts, open air, or in the main halls of our partners in the city. And we also run concert series with which we try to focus on more experimental approaches in sound art, in music. For example, here left below you can see Martin Messier, Quebecian, Montreal-based artist who plays his sewing machine orchestra music composed and performed by the help of sewing machines. Then, as mentioned, we try to revive public space or engage with public space in very different ways. On the left side, you can see Berlin-based artist Nick Novak with his Panzer, who took over autonomous city of Metelkova, like a squat city with this big sonic machine as a kind of protest machine in times of, there was some very active period when there was our partner radio student was in crisis, and we manifested this as a kind of sonic protest. In the right side, you can see dispatch work, this Lego-based work, probably you know, by artist Jan Forman, who is actually repairing cities and the walls around the globe with his Lego patchworks. And so on. As mentioned, we are running the artist talk. Well, we are constantly running or try to enrich our programs with talks, and with master classes, with a lot of educational events, and then we always document it like we are doing, like you are doing now, and present it on the artisttalk.eu. Yes, as mentioned, we were also initiator of the Tribe Network, which was basically an alternative network of, let's say, off-sites or cities that were not that connected of Eastern Europe and Balkans, which concluded in a symposium and a lot of residencies. So the format was basically that each of the residents, here we see on the left side, Jan Forman, and yes, Hungarian curator Sylvine Agi, and then the Austrian artists, they all had to go from one city to the other, to the third city, so maybe making a research, doing a production residency in a different city, and in the third one compiling or finishing the work. Our more recent project is called Monument, and as the name says, it refers to this kind of non-monuments or the monuments in question, and we understand it as unwanted, destroyed, forgotten, abandoned architectures, public spaces, and monuments that were changed. Their meaning was changed, or because of political or social changes, and that's our kind of more recent project, with which we deal as a group, as a research artistic group, but also as an organization. And this is a very good point later to talk about, because before COVID we were dealing with monuments as these forgotten places, displaced objects. But now during COVID, it seemed like some of the whole cities or a lot of the world has become a sort of monument. So it's an interesting point for us. But yes, what we do with the monument, for example, is usually we focus on in a country we find interesting example. For example, here is McKeldin Fountain from Baltimore, which was basically placed in the center of Baltimore, and it was very interesting, something between let's say monument, fountain, very beautiful place. It was important because it was like designated free speech zone area. So a lot of communities felt that this place was their own, it was important for the freedom of expression. Freddie Gray movement started that, Black Lives Matter started that there, Occupy Baltimore started there, and the city decided to tear it down because of the different reasons. And what we did was basically we scanned, no, we didn't have the scan technology at that time. We measured the fountain and created kind of a virtual or augmented reality app as a virtual memorial to this fountain, Brutalist Fountain. Inside, when you can still download it, Monument 01, on the both for iPhones and Androids, and you can discover stories of activists and communities that were living in the that were using this square. Then, yeah, another example is Arcade Gallery, which is a open air sound gallery under the arcades of Ljubljana's Central Market, which is basically, it's a sound 8-channel sound system gallery. And actually what happened was, before the city was empty, after the market was functioning, and we decided to install this sound gallery. And then the city now decided to give us another location out of the center, because this area has became very popular, or kind of gentrified. But we are thinking now, like in COVID times, again, there is a need to revive some of these sites. Yes, and so on. John, am I in my 15 minutes, or I still continue a bit?
You can continue for a few more minutes.
Okay. So yes, as I mentioned, this is Nik Nova Expanser. It's a project that I mentioned earlier, and this is another installation from the Sonica Festival, Oliver Razzi. Live performance by, another performance from the Sonica Festival, installation from the Sonica Festival. So what we do, that's a dream now. What we used to do is also like take a square in the city and make it a concert venue, which seems impossible now. This is an example of a workshop of analog visuals techniques in former Mota Point. Kalimba workshops, we do a lot of workshops for people to do their own instruments or techniques connected to sound or audiovisual expression. Another workshop with analog visuals, with sculpture from UK, drawing with light workshops for children, and so on. And maybe what is interesting is to show you this place. So now we don't have the gallery space. We have like the space that you see now. This is our base, which is called Mota Lab, because we use it as studio, as office, as it's a multi-disciplinary space. And it's like a pavilion. It's 360 glass pavilion. It's also kind of monument. It didn't have a function for many years, and then a friend has offered us, hey guys, you should do something here, and we thought, no, it's impossible, this will be too expensive. It's not so big, it's 80 square meters, but it's quite large. But the owner is a very nice person, so he offered us very good price, and we started using it. Here we see the commission of Nonotac Studio from Paris. But just recently we thought, because we use it more as I said, more as an office, as a production hub. In terms of one of the questions, like a year has passed after the start of COVID, and actually we are having this amazing gallery space here. It seems like it's very minimalist and so on, but it's basically situated by one of the most busy streets in Ljubljana. And right now the plan is actually, from this angle that we are seeing it now, to create a huge video wall, to make a window gallery, and to invite artists of younger generation who didn't have opportunity to display their works in the past year, to showcase the works, for example, now, because this is kind of COVID-free format to showcase the art. So some more examples of the artworks. That's it for the intro.
Thanks a lot, Martin, for this great presentation. It's great to get to know your organization a bit better. So I will just do the same thing and ask if anyone from the audience has a question. Otherwise, I'll have one. We spoke a bit earlier today as well around, and then you mentioned also that the political climate has all changed in Slovenia. So I would just like to, how has this affected, like, then it's the COVID situation also, but it's also a political climate that might be a bit, as I read it, a bit hostile. So how has that affected you, or have you, how are you working with that or dealing with that from your perspective? Because I see that working with public space can be quite political and probably quite, people have different opinions about what you do when you work in public space.
So yeah, I mean, we used to say in joke that we caught the double virus. We got like just at when the COVID started in Europe, we all moderate social democratic government for many years, and let's say that because of its ex-socialist country, we also have this kind of support from states. Sometimes we say also it's not as big as in let's say the so-called developer like Western Europe, but still there is you know, Ministry of Culture, municipality, and so on. You have support for the arts or cultural organizations. And we said, okay, we got double virus now because we got really like the hardcore right-wing government with the start of COVID. So I don't know, actually, because we are still, let's say, on contract last year for the program-wise, this hasn't been affected yet, but we are seeing a big change in media landscape, in the you know, the press, the whole. Actually, the government is using the epidemics as an excuse or pretext to forbid the protests. We started in Ljubljana. We started with the whole, you know, the whole city started with the protests. There was huge bike protests against the government, and the government just actually non-constitutionally forbid it, kind of against COVID law. And now the court has ruled out that it's not constitutional to forbid. So it's really like, let's say it's tense situation right now in the moment. So not just for arts, it's in general, the life, how people are living, how people can express themselves. People are getting fines, huge fines for just walking with umbrella that says, let's say, anti-governmental slogan on umbrella, as that they are not, you know, respecting anti-COVID laws, but they are walking alone. So it's a lot of absurdities that we are facing now.
I can imagine it quite stressful times for you, and not really knowing what to expect from the future, or.
Yes, but in a way, like what you post, one of the answers is also, I think it's a rhetorical question, how to keep calm in the arts.
Yeah.
The answer is you have to keep focused. I mean, it's not just, you know, it's like the more the stress is there, the more you have to be, we feel like this. I mean, the more we have to stick to what we do, stick close together and continue what we are doing. Of course, changing strategies, but that's the answer. We started to, I felt like last year we even worked more, not in terms of hours produced, but just not to give satisfaction to our government to say, oh, you started to downgrade your programs, or you work less, then we give you less money, then you don't need anything. Oh, we start, we keep on doing it. So, but in a different way, definitely.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Martin, for your presentation. And then I think we can open up a bit to discuss amongst all of us, and of course the rest of you that are participating are of course welcome to pose questions as well. But maybe I will just begin with addressing maybe what you said here in the end, that because one reading of how we work contemporary is that art has this notion of being, it can be slow, it can has other processes, it doesn't have to produce in the same way as other parts of society need to produce. We can do things differently, and but sometimes it feels like then we are quite, it's hard to get heard. If you, I don't know, downscale and think and really take this opportunity of being, and especially now in COVID, take the opportunity of being thoughtful and think things through. Are we as like artist-driven initiatives, are we running a risk of getting, I don't know, left out of a debate, or like you said, maybe they can cut our funding because it doesn't look like we're doing anything. How do you think that is this a threat also, or is it only a possibility? Do you understand? You get what I'm. So maybe we can. Is anyone spontaneously want to answer that question a bit?
I suppose I can jump in a little bit if I've understood the question properly anyway. But I think it was interesting to hear what Martin was saying at the end of it about this idea of, you've still been as busy as ever, if not busier, this idea of not giving into what your government works. And I think, or wants, in this perceived idea of that if you're not open to the public, if you can't deliver a kind of either a live event or an in-person event, that you for some reason deserve less funding. And I think what we have learned from kind of the slowing down of the program is just about like that, we've been lucky that we did that when we did, because the change of pace for us in the last year hasn't been as much of a shock to both for us and but to our funders. That slowing of pace, and also kind of having a longer lead in time to develop a project with an artist, to develop a project with a community or a community group, for example. So that's been quite interesting. And I think luckily in Ireland, which, I mean, we're all in receipt of public funding, there isn't really a kind of the same kind of philanthropic kind of idea or that exists in other countries. But public funding it's competitive, and it's divided between a lot of people, a lot of organizations, and it's been interesting because the last year there's a campaign called the National Campaign for the Arts here, and they have been instrumental in actually going to government and going to central government and putting together the kind of the points and kind of combining that research about the loss of earnings, the loss of income, the loss of jobs in the sector, and across all art forms, which has been really, really incredible. And so in the last year, our Arts Council, for example, and our Department for Culture have got an increase in their funding, which is quite amazing. And I think we're all very hesitant to kind of get comfortable with this idea, but we've been lucky in a way that there has been extra supports to be able to develop other projects, to move projects online. But that is a particular bubble, and I think we're in some way we're all kind of waiting for this bubble to burst. And what happens when that money runs out? Because obviously I think everyone around the world are kind of bracing themselves for an impending kind of recession, kind of a global economic recession. So that's kind of interesting. So at the moment, like with this National Campaign for the Arts, it's been incredibly interesting to see how this campaign has really you know, put the value of arts and culture kind of to the forefront in central government, which hasn't really happened in the same way before. Usually, like the department and the Arts Council, they're kind of always kind of pushed to the side. There's other things that are more important. But I think as well, I mean, what we found is that there's been a real hunger from a general public to engage with arts activities and to, you know, people want to be back in museums, they want to be back in galleries, they want to be in front of work, they want to be at concerts, they want to be at theatre. So that's kind of hugely kind of beneficial. And I think it's about capturing that desire from a general public and actually translating that to kind of more economic models and, you know, showcasing that it does have a longer economic benefit to the country as a whole. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely, we've been lucky that there has been supports for the last year, but there is that threat, that kind of like looming threat of, you know, there's an uncertainty for 2022, for example, or 2023. So I'm not quite sure if I answered the question exactly, but moved around it for sure anyway. But yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else of you want to join in there? How?
Maybe me. I think depends so much on the financial support. For example, our government doesn't really support us, so we have to be busy, you know, to apply for internationals to arrange our budget somehow. So I feel a little bit that it's not an option to being slow in that way.
Sorry,
yeah.
my internet was a bit slow, but yeah. But how has it been for you now during the pandemic? If I guess it's a necessary kind of, it slows down without you wanting it to, or the
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we changed our programs and also postponed a lot of things. So now we are empty, if we can say that, than before, how busy we were. So yeah, now it's really different. And it's also a great opportunity to rethink your strategy and rearrange the things. But after the pandemic, if everything going back, I'm sure that we will be very busy again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about you, Martin? Are you going back to something, or are you going for how are you looking out for after the pandemic for you?
Actually, I mean, the thing that I said, that we are in a way even more busy, that was more reaction to the government, let's say. If I say about the pandemics, it came as a hit, right? It's like a shock, big shock for everyone. And if I may say, I try to see also the positive aspects, because there are only negative aspects discussed, or mostly, but one of the positive definitely was this pause. We all felt, I think, that this was too much, the way that things were produced, presented, you know, the whole lifestyle was too much, and the way we treated, well, it's from ecological point of view to inner universe, so how you treated yourself. So and actually it was I think something like this was needed, even if it sounds like a sacrilege, but definitely now we are changing the way we see the, let's say, I mean, we need to think about our programs. Let's say, if we say about programs for a festival, it's like we are part of a festival network. We have big, you know, discussions. We had discussions what to do last year already. Now that we are seeing with the big network, like European or global network, we see, okay, this is staying. So let's not repeat this streaming, etc. Scenarios. And I feel this is staying, it's changing. It's like, you can say it's an experiment. It's definitely something that will change us all. Like our response is basically, we are based in digital art. So let's say this kind of explorative field between digital and analog, but we don't want to go into this field to be only present on augmented reality, virtual reality, online, like zooming in, zooming out all the time. We try to find the ways how to still engage audiences as a physical being. So last year we developed the idea of sound gardens. So we were placing a lot of sound installations in gardens, in botanical garden, in the city garden, the city park, etc. This year we are trying to think of a new space by the gallery, so it will be called River Gallery. Basically a pavilion, again, like multi-channel sound pavilion, but also placing the contents outside. We are starting to think of a lot of activities that are closer to nature or semi-urban places. So the cities also have showed as a, yeah, I mean, or let's say we started to discover more of the, because of the lockdown also, we started to discover our local micro natures, micro ecosystems. So I feel like everything will be changed. And as I mentioned, we deal with this kind of idea of monuments. Let's say Ljubljana was in the past a very the touristification came in the past 10 years. So Ljubljana center became a very neat tourist destination, and with pandemics, it became empty. It's still empty now. It's like, because we have locked, we have closed bars for more than half a year and so on. So yeah, I think the whole perspective on the whole world has been changed. So I don't know how, I mean, we are still thinking about it, how to deal with this and how to go forward.
I came to think about one thing, maybe it was when I spoke to you last time, Niam, about that. I also feel that we're learning a lot about, we're making new experience and also learning how to do things differently. We did things one way and now we have another way, and maybe some of the solutions are in between. But I got to think also, maybe a similar thought, that have we learned enough, or are we going back to, our society going back too fast? Should we kind of stay in this mode, maybe, even though the pandemic is slowly being fought and won, the war, hopefully, that people are dying, so that's of course super sad, but maybe we should stay in the same mode for another year, just to, I don't know, get somewhere and not just go back to normal. Because everybody, that feels like people are like really, they want to go to parties, they want to see music, they want to go to concerts, and maybe all of the organizations and the artists and musicians, etc., are going back to exactly the same. Or do you think we have learned enough, would be the question, maybe?
No, actually. I think there's a lot of learning happened, and I think what was interesting in Ireland, I suppose last year when everything kind of kicked off, and again it was that almost dramatic pause that everyone, people started working from home, the schools closed, universities closed, galleries, museums, all cultural organizations closed, and cultural events stopped. But also wider society, and with politics as well, it was almost socialist principles and socialist practices that were then being implemented to almost keep the country going for those initial few months. There was, if people lost their jobs, for example, there was a kind of a social kind of benefit kind of model. It was a temporary wage subsidy scheme for businesses, and all these kind of supports to help people survive, help people live. There was huge conversations around what is minimum wage, what's an acceptable kind of social welfare payment, and all of these questions. There's also, like in Ireland, we have a two-tier health system. We have a public health system and a private health system, but in building up to, you know, our government, I suppose, trying to understand how high our numbers would be, or how much healthcare services that we would need, they decided to essentially rent the private hospitals. So it kind of, for a short while, it did away with that two-tier health system, and it was, you know, at the time, it felt like there was this moment where actually, you know, this center-right politics, you know, it would move a bit more left, and it would have like socialist practices. And for me, that is, you know, it still kind of comes back to practices of care. And then now I can see it slowly going back to this kind of pre-COVID world again, and in a similar way. So that's, I suppose, you know, generally kind of in Ireland. And obviously, you know, some of these supports, they're not sustainable long term. You know, there has to be solutions about how to fund all of these programs and these supports, and that's a bigger conversation to have. But certainly, when we stopped programming and we kind of took time and rethought kind of certain aspects of our program, we were about to kick off quite a large project that we've been working on for a number of years. But because we paused that program, again, we were able to have much more in-depth conversations with the artists that we were working with. It really deepened our kind of relationship to those artists, and we were able to set up meetings like by Zoom with other, you know, international artists and artists that may not have met throughout the run of the exhibition. And, you know, there was opportunities there for collaboration where there possibly wasn't prior to that. But what I'm finding now, and it's a point of maybe a little bit of point of frustration, is that, you know, there's projects that I'm working on, and, you know, with partners in all over Europe and all over the world, and there is that rush to go back to attending international events, and, you know, to really speed up this process. And maybe it's me personally, or maybe it's because of the situation in Ireland is still, you know, relative to our population, we still have quite, you know, daily case numbers, you know, higher than they actually were this time last year. So it's still quite serious here, and we're still in a quite strict lockdown. So for me, you know, when I'm working on these international projects with other partners, and I see, you know, in a way I'm envious that they're very much getting back to normal, and kind of, you know, it's to do with their own healthcare systems, to do with their vaccine rollout. It's just not comparable to Ireland. But it does frustrate me, this idea of kind of, you know, this rush to kind of get back to attending international events, for example, when maybe it feels a little bit too soon, or, you know, this idea of like larger events, which is kind of interesting, because I think as well, in 2019, it was probably my busiest year that I've had in, you know, in terms of international travel. And I counted that I took 26 flights in 2019, which is huge. And it's a huge environmental impact that I feel incredibly guilty for. So in a way, 2020, I was relieved. I was like, okay, I'm offsetting this a little bit, you know, but I don't want to kind of get back to that rhythm, because again, this idea of working fast or slow, it felt too fast. You know, I was on a plane or in a different country every other month, and you didn't have enough time to be in any one location to really, you know, get to know the context that you were working in, or get to know people that you were around. And as well, when I came back and started working on our local programs, you're thinking about the next one all the time, or you're thinking, oh, okay, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be in another country again. So everything feels a bit rushed, or it's a bit too stop-start, which I find work personally quite frustrating. So I am very I do not want to go back to that model. You know, I don't want to go back to that way of working. And it is frustrating to see that, you know, other, like, maybe there is a rush to kind of go back to that kind of pace. So I'm trying to resist it as much as I can, but how successful I will be with that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can totally relate to that. the kind of the hectic tempo somehow, and for me, I'm responsible for the guest studios here, and we haven't had any like proper international guests for a year, which is super boring, really boring. But it's also, of course, like this. It's now we don't have to think about the environmental impact of all the people traveling here, and we kind of have to think about other solutions. And but for me personally, I think that some of the ideas coming up now might be useful, but now we can hopefully get people, and that's what people would also like to invite people. Of course, we would like to meet other people, but maybe there are middle ways to be found here.
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely. And I mean, you want to be clear as well. I mean, at some point I do want to travel, and I do want to go, you know, to other countries, but I think it's about changing the pace of that again. And you know, this idea as well, you know, as working in the arts, that you have to be on a plane every other day or every other week or month or whatever it is. You have to be working internationally. And I think, I suppose in the last year you can still work internationally, but you know, out of your living room, you know, essentially. I mean, this talk is based in Gothenburg, which, you know, you wouldn't normally fly someone over to give a talk, you know, I don't think. So, I mean, to be able to do this kind of program, I think is really interesting, and keeping with that idea that, you know, for shorter kind of maybe events or talks or research opportunities that can be done remotely. And I think, and where kind of maybe artworks or different things can exist online where it's still relevant, I think they're kind of definitely things that can be taken forward. So there is some learning, absolutely, and some things to be kind of kept, I think, from this period.
For you, Nicolette, that are more representing an organization that doesn't really have any public funding, maybe doesn't really have the opportunity of this, like you said earlier, this being slow or continuing being slow even. How will it look ahead for you in this? What kind of learnings have you been made that you will be taking with you?
Yeah, personally, I enjoyed this time because I could concentrate, and I skipped the time of this traveling all the time. So I spared for myself a lot of time also. And I also can focus into a lot of things, which ones are very important. So in that way, yes, I'm also a little bit scared to jump back into normal life, because I feel that I need some time to go back or to get used to it. Because now I feel that it's strange for me to go to a restaurant and meet and eat together with a lot of people, or I don't know, going for a pub. You know, it's a lot of things has changed, and also for my relation to the hygiene things. Now it's totally different for me. So it's not gonna be the same, I think. Also personally, and also for initiatives. Yeah, there are so much learnings from this period of time. Yeah, the bad part is huge, but the good ones are also, and it's just, I don't know, I can imagine after 10 years, I can tell a story from this period of time. And I'm curious how I'm gonna experience or close this 1.5 year.
Yeah. And Martin, have you learned enough, or like my initial...
No, please, COVID, teach me more. No, I mean, I think like I was trying, you know, to present negative and positive aspects, but I think one of the interesting part is I was also traveling too much. It was too hectic, like even 2-3 things per month, you know, like countries, and so not just ecological, but also like it's hard to deal with this. But I think what we've learned, or what is the new aspect, is we decided also to act more regionally. So it means like I think there's something very nice to start to be more active in the area of horse ride, you know, like we would go to, let's say, Italy or Croatia or even Hungary, hopefully Austria, and be more active on these non-plane destinations. That's like the thing that is really like that we decided this is it. This is the focus. But for the rest, I don't know. I think we are still learning. I mean, we are still learning with how to deal with these empty spaces and empty cities. And I think people would get crazy because we do this festival. And I said, if everything is impossible, because sometimes this the rules are sometimes even, of course, you want to respect all the rules, right? And you don't want to hurt people. But sometimes it's absurd. Sometimes the way that prescriptions are made, at least in our country, are not in line with epidemiological experts. And if we said if everything else drops, if we can do it, we're gonna throw a big open air in the city park, with limitations and everything. But I imagine people will go crazy if we do something like this in a positive sense, you know. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, now we'll be going on for 1.5 hours already,
we have
or
to
more.
Open up for the audience.
Yeah. Is there there's a question from the audience? I saw the Pia you put on your video. Maybe you have something to add.
Some question or thought, because it is really interesting to listen to you, and I think a lot that we have talked in the international group a lot about centrum and periphery, and that when you think about that has changed a lot now, because the centrum is close to your neighborhood. It's not like artist center is here. It's not somewhere else. It's where you work. So that I think is really interesting. When I listen to you, I start to talk about that. But my question is maybe mostly for Nicole. How does the artist run places in? I mean, that you say, Martin, that Croatia, Hungary, Slovenia are close to each other. How do you have some collaboration between your artist-run spaces in that area, and how does it look?
I would say not enough, because usually, I mean, in art, the things go fast, and then you go to the main festival where everyone goes, or the main biennale, the main exhibition where everyone goes, and then you skip probably something that you have in front of you, like it's something like you would have in the garden, a beautiful jewel, and you don't see it, right? And so that's the thing. We are reconnecting with people from Trieste, with people from Venice, for example, not part of Biennale, but artist-run space. Actually, I just re-established contacts with some of my Hungarian colleagues, because they're close, and hopefully we continue with Nicolette something too. So I think it's in this aspect, when I said this is a decision that we would do something, it's about people, of course. It's about connections with people in these regions. And with Austria, there is more or less. With Croatia, there is more and more as well. So there is, and of course, each country is facing their own, historically their own context, but also now with pandemics, it's changed the way people are dealing. But yeah. So looking forward to this.
Yeah, and I just continued because I'm so interesting, because our city, Göteborg, have a really strong artist-run scene. Like we have a lot of galleries and people do. And much of that is one Hungarian artist, Endre Nemes. I don't know, Nicole, he was here teaching, and he was one of those who started up the artist-run scenes here. So he have been really important. So that could be something interesting to talk about maybe in the future, how methods go. We think that is from how the methods from one artist can be really big when he moved to another place. Yeah. So it was just some thoughts.
I mean, that's super. It's also almost, yeah, it's I don't know, in this time contagious how they kind of spread like viruses, some of the thoughts.
Good virus.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions from our it's always weird in this format that you don't really know. You're at the same, but you don't really know the audience is there or not. But you're here. But we can open up for a few more questions if people want and have time. I have maybe one question. It's a bit, I have many questions, but we shouldn't go on forever. But maybe more connecting back to some of the other themes that are not so related to the pandemic and pace. It's more about maybe the voice. I call it the voice, but because in a more like a public debate, which is not maybe doing art, but many artists and artist-run initiatives have opinions and express themselves in many ways. How, in relation to your initiatives, how are you think that you are perceived like by the general public? How do you think that your voice sound in relation to other expressions and other platforms that really try to make themselves heard, maybe in a political way? How do you think that kind of the artistic voice of your organization stand in relation to other? Do you understand the question? Nicolette, you are nodding, so I can begin with you.
I know that I shouldn't do that. No, I'm just joking. Our artist-run gallery based on DIY culture. So we have this small culture, and for us this is very important, and also for the young emerging artists, and we got a lot of support from them. But yeah, I think that's good if you would like to aim the wider audience also. But yeah, we mostly focus on alternative culture. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So do you think that your audience are quite like already interested in your specific expressions? Or,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We gain a lot of attentions, so it's getting bigger and bigger, and even big names mentions us. So yeah, it's, sometimes it's strange because you can see only your initiative as you are inside of this group. So it's very hard to examine yourself from others' perspective. But yeah, absolutely, if you keep going and you know, arranging a lot of things, you get more and more attention. Absolutely.
Maybe I could pose the questions to you, Naim, as well, because you mentioned that you were part of this more like public policy projects, and I guess that's other kind of organizations that are not artistic are involved in that dialogues as well. How are you perceived in those kind of talks and situations? How are they art? How are your perspective in comparison to other perspectives in the city?
It's quite a big question, I guess. And whereas I don't feel like I can speak for the public of Limerick for sure, but definitely I suppose I think the scale of Limerick is very important in terms of how we work within the city. It is a small city. You have a population of 100,000, so that makes it quite. I suppose it's quite it's easy for us to access communities in that sense, or to get to know people in Limerick, on a very kind of personal level as well. It also, our proximity, our location within the city is on the central spine. So, and we have this, street front venue with large windows that, we just are a little bit more accessible, I think, to kind of a general audience. We're very much, we're there, you can't ignore the building, Some people, of course, have never stepped foot inside the building. I'm not trying to kind of claim that every citizen in Limerick has visited us. But I think, again, kind of going back to this kind of change in our pace in the programming, it allowed us time to get really involved in kind of more kind of community initiatives. The PPN, which is the Public Participation Network, is, what I mentioned earlier, is something that we did kind of join in around 2015, 2016 as well. And that is a local authority initiative that exists in every city and county in Ireland. But yeah, other groups are in there. There's environmental groups, there's business communities, there is like marching bands, for example. There's a whole host of different community-based organizations, as well as, community organizations that are kind of they would be service providers, whether it's for kind of domestic abuse or kind of different services, across the city. So being part of that network allows us to kind of obviously meet and network with all of these organizations, but also make sure that people kind of know us and that they know that they can come to us. And we have hosted a number of events for different community organizations. I think kind of pre-COVID and pre-pandemic as well, one kind of area that, or one thing that really kind of brought us to a much larger kind of public awareness within Limerick was the referendum around repealing the 8th Amendment in Ireland that happened in 2018. And that was around bodily autonomy and abortion rights for women, which had been illegal because of this amendment that came in the 80s. And we decided we would host the campaign to repeal for the last 2 weeks in the lead up to the referendum. And we acted as a kind of a drop-off centre for volunteers, or a meeting point for volunteers who were out canvassing, but also we gave space for councillors, for people that were particularly affected by this issue. So that we became very much an open room for that campaign within the city. And that garnered us a lot of support. And that's not the reason that we decided to host this project. They needed very much a city centre location. And we took a team vote and made sure everyone was comfortable with it as well, because we didn't want to assume, how our team would be voting, for an issue like that as well. And it was very divisive in this country. But we did host that campaign in 2018, and there was an awful lot of community groups again associated with that campaign that were feeding in. So we got to know them again, through that and through different events, hosting different events with community groups, as I said. So I think, we would have quite a strong voice within the community. And I know I kind of alluded to or mentioned briefly that, we had a precarious tenancy for a number of years, and thankfully that's been resolved now. But just after that, we hosted that campaign in 2018, we nearly lost our building, or there was a threat around us losing our building, and that became public knowledge later in 2018. And there was a huge public outcry from the people of Limerick, and it wasn't predominantly the arts community. Obviously we had support from artists, but it was mostly community groups. It was mostly the general public that had, a kind of an affiliation, or kind of had an affection towards us as well. They'd, been there through festivals, but in particular this campaign kind of helped with that as well. And because of that public outcry, it went to local government, and then there was an outpouring of support from local government and local kind of councillors that we weren't expecting, and councillors that had never stepped foot in Armstrong House, that never had spoken to any of us. So that was quite interesting, and all of a sudden there's this debate about the value of Armstrong House on local radio between our two mayors, which was kind of mad, and it's something that we never planned or never kind of, you know, it's most people thought it was some sort of targeted marketing campaign or something, which it really wasn't. But because of that kind of public outcry and that community support, you know, councillors and politicians locally had to take it seriously. They had to take, you know, these, you know, the threat of a loss of a community art space seriously. And because of that, we stayed on the agenda, and now we have a 30-year lease. And it was a very complicated, you know, process to get there, and it was a complicated process before that incident as well. But I don't think we would still be there if it wasn't for that public outcry. So I would like to think that, you know, our voice is quite strong, or perceived quite strongly within the community. But again, I mean, that's just how I have felt, or I have felt supported by the communities and the audiences, you know, that we have. I could be totally wrong, of course, but that's just, it's just how it's felt.
It sounds great to get that kind of, I don't know, backup from without really expecting it, maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, just to give it context, I mean, we started a conversation around securing our tenancy in 2015, and we thought it was ironed out and sorted in 2017, and then we found out it wasn't. So, you know, our whole team, we've gone through a roller coaster of emotions, you know, being absolutely devastated, thinking that we were going to lose our space, lose our projects, lose our jobs. And then to have that validation from the public was kind of incredible. It was overwhelming, and it was very emotional. And it just, I suppose, it reassured us and made us feel very grateful for, you know, to be able to do what we do, but reassured us as well that, you know, people, you know, valued what we were doing, and felt that they could stand up for us, and that they, so that was, yeah, it was something quite special that, you know, we couldn't have planned for or we didn't expect.
Great. Maybe we will be wrapping up really soon, but Martin, do you have anything to add to this latest topic here in the end?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, how you can be heard. I mean, let's say that the main issue, as I mentioned, like in our country, is really the government and its policies. And I don't feel like, as an art organization, we're dealing with very niche art, right? Sound art, architecture, public space. And so in these terms, we just decided, and we rented some of the equipment to some people that are more, let's say, some activists that were running the protests. Of course, we all joined in, but we are not, you know, let's be, you know, clear that we, as an art space or with specific focus, we don't necessarily cover all of the areas. So yeah, we rented the battery speaker and some equipment to those guys, and they made they use it very well. But it's very funny, so like in local context. But then if you look at from the other perspective, that we deal with very specific topic, let's say monuments, and we had at the height of the pandemics, we had the symposium, our yearly symposium, which would be like from 50 to 150 people we could host, and that would be already a lot of people, because it's like specific, right? Abandoned monuments, forgotten architecture, and so on. But then, because everything was, we were about to, because of the pandemic rules, we had to even postpone or cancel the symposium. We decided for a global one. I mean, like what we are doing now, and we did it in partnership with Kino-Šiška, main cultural center. Like, it's more for concerts, usually used for concerts. And we focused on that, like bringing audiences from everywhere with this very specific topic. And in the end, we had 800 viewers at the online, I mean, the real time, So the guys, like the technical guys from the place, they told us, okay, this is even better than the rock concerts that we host, you know. So sometimes it's strange. It's funny how you, what your voice means. If you talk about very specific and strange topic, you can even, you can reach audiences. And for some of the, let's say, hard topics that we are facing here, maybe it's better to just help the ones that have the voice and connect with them in this way.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a sound strategy. It's always kind of, from my perspective, I think it's a bit hard to balance like art and activism, how so that it doesn't really, that the art doesn't take over the activism, or the activism doesn't take over the art. It's maybe it's to separate sometimes.
It's a hard topic because, of course, you are activist, but you know, some activists are more. It's better than real activists do the activism, and art doesn't just dress up in the coat of activism. It's a struggle.
I think we have to say that this is kind of our final words, because we've been going on for almost 2 hours, and I think it's super interesting to have you here. It would be great to continue the conversation at some point in time, because it's really interesting questions, and you get to think about more ideas all the time when you're talking and listening. So I would just like to thank you a lot for attending and participating and sharing, and thanks to the people that participated in the Zoom event, and also thanks to the people that might have seen this on Facebook that hasn't been able to interact. So
thank you very much.
Yes, so I think that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. And hopefully we'll be in touch in some other way ahead. Thanks a lot, and
thank you,
bye
John.
for now.
Bye.
Thanks, John.